Hello! Today we'll be reviewing Silent Night, the 2023 John Woo action movie that nobody talked about. Pun absolutely intended. As always, I'll keep it generally spoiler-free. We'll go over the several aspects of the film that I want to emphasize, and I will rank it at the end. When it comes to movie reviews, this is a bit of a unicycle with training wheels attached to a straight-line train track, but there's a couple of sentences I really want to say about it, and I relish the opportunity to shout out John Woo as soon as possible. So here we go. The story of this movie is as classic as the Hollywood sign, and right up the alley of anyone prone to suffer the dreaded influence of masculinity. Our protagonist's child falls to a stray bullet let loose during a drive-by shooting skirmish between two rival gang cars. Our protagonist, your average cul-de-sac dweller, snaps and pursues these cars like a maniac despite the fact he has zero tools or plans to deal with them. He gets dispatched quite promptly with a bullet to the throat. He survives, but it does not. What follows is, I don't mean the monster clown, I mean the throat. What follows is a descent into an utterly violent and silent madness. He commits everything he has and is to pursuing revenge for his son, losing everything but his ability to kill, which he gains, because he had none. He loses his wife, he loses his sanity, he loses his innocence, he loses everything, except what he gains. Most of the movie is in preparation for that fatal Silent Night, which eventually does come, delivering a sequence of set pieces that culminate in its climactic ending. And that's the movie. If there's anything we can expect out of a John Woo production, it's a simple yet engaging premise that we don't often see, and I'm not talking about the revenge plot, but the sea of circumstance his characters are awash in. The muteness. Tying to that, let's start with writing, because there's no sound to writing, unless you're writing like you're typing really loudly or just scribbling really loudly. I guess there's a little sound to writing if I think about it, so that doesn't really work. Credited to Robert Archer Lynn, this movie has the peculiar goal to avoid dialogue as much as possible, so one would think there would be great care in what words are chosen to be said. Emphasized, artistic, poetic, life-changing. But nope! Either by design or sheer error, the dialogues we hear aren't memorable life-changing quotes, but rather useless yet somehow cathartic wastes of breath. These characters are hauntingly quiet, always looking to find the right words and always failing, especially when they finally pronounce them. Or it's just a background character asking for help. Much like the protagonist, whose voice is lost forever, we never get the satisfaction of release from the silence. The quiet is forced on us by all this near supernatural dramatic tension that permeates every character we encounter who might be capable of speech, but doesn't want to engage in it until they're very awkwardly forced to. And then they just sound awkward, anticlimactic. What is not anticlimactic is the Silent Night. We spend most of the movie seeing our protagonist preparing for that finale, which I liked as something to make it stand out from other revenge thrillers. This man is not an ex-Special Forces killing machine, but an average Joe, and what he has to go through to get to the point where he can mass murder a criminal gang is nothing so small as to get relegated to a 2-minute montage. It is, in fact, most of the movie. An hour-long marathon of effort and sacrifice. Fueled by grief-stricken pain and heart-wrenching trauma, we follow every step of his preparation. From investigation, finding out where they are and who they are, to training. I would give the whole thing an 8 out of 10. I feel like there were a few aspects that weren't really believable about the investigation part. Just looked like he would have been noticed at some point, that's all, like the gangs would have noticed him. The final thing to note is the depiction of a gang life and crime, of the gangsters. In a novel approach that might as well be akin to the original approach that was consigned to history until I watched this movie, these gangsters are not portrayed sympathetically or even more astoundingly, cool. They're scary and violent in a way that you just want them gone. You don't want to be them at all, and you don't want them around you, you don't want them in your world. You know, you want them gone so that the world will feel safer and more just. No banger insults or slick-ass lines, no honor among thieves or respect for the innocent. This is all crucial to make the protagonist's action more digestible, but way more often is this premise used exactly to give the audience an indigestion and get them more against the hero. Way more often is the audience made to feel guilty for agreeing with the protagonist and his fetishizing, quotation mark, of vengeance. You know, see, they have kids, they have families, it's just society that makes them ride around in cars exchanging gunfire. You know what I'm talking about. But this script is clearly not on that page, but on a much older page, from a previous generation's book. Cul-de-sac innocence is good and virtuous, and it's upsetting the ultimate societal ill. Gangsters bad and monstrous, and their destruction the ultimate society healing. I found this movie to be utterly seeping a profoundly Western, if not strictly North American, mythos. It completely caught me off guard, seeing as it's a John Woo movie, and I do wonder in 2024. And I do wonder, well, 2023, right? Yeah, I do wonder if he had any part whatsoever in the movie's ultimate message and tone. Then again, I'm familiar enough with his work that I wouldn't be terribly surprised if that was the case. After all, the Hollywood he fell in love with was, in fact, that bygone black and white violent morality Hollywood that he paid homage to in so many of his Hong Kong action thrillers, and he has always had a flair for mixing immensely dramatized characters into the mix of his movies. And while we're on the subject, directing. I will resist the temptation to give an impromptu treatise on John Woo, but I would be remiss not to mention that he made this movie off the back of, or even in the middle of, producing what many consider the Chinese equivalent to Lord of the Rings, which I, for one, think it's a gross overestimation of what the two movies have been. I'm talking about the Red Cliff Parts 1 and 2. There are a couple of medieval fantasy epics based off China's celebrated romance of the Three Kingdoms, or chapters thereof in any case. I'll leave my thoughts on that for another video, but suffice it to say that that is a project very much unlike his entire bibliography. And despite that, it's likely very much the highest profile, most expensive of his movies. For sure, it has taken a lot of his attention. Silent Night, I can confidently say, is much more in his wheelhouse. Highly dramatized performances about the very edges of human conditions, and the highest stakes when it comes to the matters of the heart. All it's missing is ridiculously cool slow-motion dual pistol yielding, and maybe some baby tossing. Those who know, know. Anyway, what's there to say? This guy is just a confident master of his craft. From high-octane and viciously violent set pieces to the more quiet and somber scenes where his cast are allowed to do what actors most love to do. The scenes are edited together so that the audience will never get lost as to where they are or how time is passing. I think they do a good job illustrating the progression of the protagonist, both in regards to his physical improvement and also the deterioration of his relationship with his wife, which is interesting in itself. I find that the greatest weakness of John Woo movies, which were very much exacerbated in his Hollywood stint, is exactly ham performances by his actors, fully supported by, let's call it, too stylized dialogue, not to call it goofy.
You know, I can eat a page for hours.
In a movie where the characters don't speak, however, this weakness is, in this very premise, neutralized. In this way, funnily enough, the aspect that might primarily take someone out of a John Woo movie is thus attenuated to an extreme degree. One might even say it's been muted. Everything's shot great. The look and feel seem to me like it comes off exactly as intended. Somber, scary, violent, a relief, and still has that flair and style that we can expect out of him. Those visually striking shots. I sincerely have no idea how this movie came about, but I didn't get the impression that Woo phoned it in, which was my assumption when I first heard about this movie coming out of nowhere with little to no marketing. Due respect, it still hit theaters, and, reiterating my point, everyone seems to have been seriously invested in this project. If he did phone it in, then I guess it's just that good. But my impression was that this was just a reprieve from his Red Cliff project, just something that he was super comfortable in, that he's always loved to do. On the performances, Joel Kinnaman heads up the cast as Brian Godlock, that's a John Woo character's name right there, a humble salt-of-the-earth electrician who spirals further and further into a hateful obsession of the people who killed his son, and everyone who might even be tangentially on their team. I think my man does a great job in what has to be one of the most demanding kind of jobs for an actor. He is the titular role, so he has the most screen time out of anybody, and he's playing a character who gives up on communicating with words. Immediately, he refuses to use the machine voice, and seldom does he resort to writing, and never does he stoop to gesticulating, as that might insert a slight sniff of comedy into this downpouring of violent drama. Instead, the character commits to an hour plus of communicating with eyes and expressions. Angry, dour, apologetic, regretful, tired, painful, sad, faithless, desperate, agonized, and on and on and on. You gotta respect the challenge, because unlike your Die Hard or Lethal Weapon stars, there is no avenue to work off pleasantness or calm, the quipping charisma that lets you breathe out the tension, dealing with a comedy relief side character. He is driving a roller coaster that's always going down until it drops into the floor, and the camera is always on him. Cannot praise him enough, even though it's my personal opinion that the order just proved too tall. And that goes for the other actors. Kid Cudi as the not-so-investigative cop assigned to the case that joins the anticlimactic shootout. Catalina Marino as Saya, wife and mother who is forced to lose her husband like she lost her son, only in a more slow and arguably painful manner. Harold Torres as the lead gangster responsible for the drive-by shooting of his son and many other crimes, whose evil disposition knows no bounds or pause. Simply put, I just did not buy it. It is unbelievable to me, especially with the characters that can talk, that they would so often choose to be silent and express themselves like the protagonist, with sad faces. While it absolutely is necessary to do so for the sake of the atmosphere that the movie intends to maintain, it just fails to feel lifelike. Some other tactic, I guess, ought to have been used, because instead of being immersed in the claustrophobic tragedy that the movie was aiming for, I found myself repelled by the inhumanity of the behavior on display. And I don't mean inhuman as in evil or monstrous, but in the literal way. It just didn't feel lifelike. Veering off for a quick digression, I don't know that the actors could have done a better job. Maybe if the protagonist was shown freaking out when someone talked so that they all stopped trying, or if he was deaf, I'm not sure, but some additional premise was definitely needed to not have these moments, and they're not few, where the audience will be pushed out of the movie by a truly alien interaction. On the action, it's great. I broached the subject a lot during the directing portion of this, so I'll keep this short. Very bloody, very gory, very brutal, mostly in the third act, though we get a really good first fight where our protagonist struggles with his first interaction with real violence and the act of killing. The shootouts are great. There's style, there's lighting, it's just pretty nice. Can't say it's the best ever though, or even uniquely its own, and it kind of needed to be one of those to really make this movie stand out, I believe. With that said, let's rank the movie. The way we rank movies over here, reiterating every single time because that is the professional thing to do, is on a grade scale, optionally with a subgrade. Same way you can have a B or a B+. From great to bad it goes a must rewatch, which would be an S, the best, must watch, can rewatch, can watch, should not rewatch, should not watch, do not rewatch, and do not watch, which I call trash grade. I rank The Silent Night as a must-watch, shouldn't rewatch. Something like that. So like a C+ or a B-, maybe even just a C. I think, though it was marketed for the action, the movie ends up standing out in its attempt at a uniquely stifling atmosphere. I do believe that. It tries, more than I've seen any other action thriller try, to make the audience feel the weight of losing a child. It uses this enforced silence to speak the language of agonized despair as it turns into unspeakable fury. This movie didn't get any real attention from anyone. Done on a low budget on a short schedule, which will come as no surprise to anyone, I think it deserves a watch for the unique experience it provides, and just to see how the actors do. They do put up good performances despite my earlier criticism. I doubt you'll ever want a second viewing though, and it's also a hard one to suggest to someone who doesn't know the director or is particularly interested in this very specific movie experience. Dour, one-note action thriller. Anyway, did you watch it at all? Let me know what you thought. But most of all, be well, take care, and see you next time. KuzScopia signing out.